Good day, friends. My name is Dan George, and I am your host of Reconciliation Road, an exciting new podcast I have started with the support of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition. Upon the launch of my podcast, some have asked me, why is reconciliation important anyway? I believe that the reconciliation process is important for all Canadians because it's about the basics of how we treat each other as fellow human beings and the kind of relationships and communities we want to build for the future. As Reconciliation Canada Ambassador Chief Dr. Robert Joseph says, our future and the well-being of all our children rests with the kind of relationships we build today. For many Canadians, we don't really know much about the ongoing impact of Indian residential schools, how it continues to be felt throughout generations and contribute to social problems. Residential schools for Indigenous peoples in Canada date back to the 1870s, and the last school only closed in 1996. More than 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were placed in these schools. Connections with culture and family, parenting skills, and intergenerational relationships were damaged or lost. People were broken. With this podcast, we will take the necessary time to acknowledge and understand the past and find a new way forward together. When a problem arises here at Reconciliation Road, we don't sit around waiting for a solution to present itself. We get out there and take action to find the solutions ourselves. So speaking of solutions, my guest for our third episode is none other than Niilo Edwards, the Executive Director of the FNMPC. Welcome to the program, Niilo.
Nice to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here today. If you're unaware of Niilo Edwards, if you've been living way in the back 40 and have no access to internet or satellite television, you might not know Niilo Edwards. But to those of us who know Niilo, he's a very accomplished individual. He joined the organization, the FNMPC, the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, as Executive Director upon the Major Projects Coalition's establishment in 2017. Niilo was responsible for the overall organizational strategy, including the management of the technical services provided to coalition members to assist them in participating in major infrastructure projects on a commercial basis across Canada. Prior to this role, Niilo served as an advisor to the First Nations Financial Management Board, one of the institutions created under the First Nations Fiscal Management Act. In 2019, Niilo was appointed to the University of Ottawa's Positive Energy Advisory Council for Canadian Energy Policy. In 2020, he joined the Board of Directors of the Canadian Council for Private-Public Partnerships. Niilo, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with me here today and on National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I know it's a very important day to all Canadians, particularly to the Major Projects Coalition members throughout this country. And maybe, Niilo, just to get us started, can you talk about some of the initiatives that you are currently working on? What are you spending your time doing?
Sure, Dan. There's a multi-pronged approach in the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. We're set up to provide our members with capacity building services around business development in terms of understanding the impacts of proposed projects to traditional territory and general business literacy. Putting that into action looks like our team supporting individual projects from a variety of different levels. We can be very active or very passive depending on what the community or group of communities wishes us to do. Our services are completely tailored to meet the needs of communities and to enhance their existing capacity and decision-making ability. We are engaged in 5 major projects across the country, varying from an LNG project to a lot of active interest in the electricity market, both from a generation and transmission perspective. Our projects are located in British Columbia and in Ontario. So that's the project development side. We also have an economic, an environmental focus to the organization. As our members have always said, it's the environment that comes first. And so we've developed a series of tools and guidance materials to help our members better navigate the federal and provincial environmental regulatory processes, with a view of ensuring that Indigenous traditional knowledge, cultural and community values can be leveraged to ensure that those values are first and foremost through the regulatory process or at the negotiation table when communities are developing a relationship with a project proponent. That differs greatly from the way things used to be, where not a lot of importance was put on those very important and a lot of times intangible values that communities hold close. And the third rail of support is policy and advocacy. We've taken recently an approach that looks at sustainable investment and how do our members interact with the globalized movement around sustainable investment, particularly environmental, social, and governance standards, otherwise known as ESG standards. Why that matters is because we have institutional investors, pension funds, life insurance companies, and others in the financial sector like banks who are far removed from our members' territories, but yet they have an impact because they are making business decisions that ultimately impact the land, the traditional territories of our members. So we've taken this approach through our advocacy that Indigenous voices need to be heard in the frameworks under which investment occurs in Canada. We've also taken the approach on access to capital and ensuring that our members have the supports where they can become co-proponents or co-developers with industry regarding the projects that impact their territories, so that there's a greater say and a greater amount of influence, so that things that are important to communities don't get overlooked.
That's quite the menu of services that the Major Projects Coalition provides to its membership. And is that on a fee-for-service basis?
No, it's not, Dan. When we got our start and we got our mandate from leadership, when the coalition was in the early stages of development, we recognized that human and financial resources were scarce in communities, and that this initiative had to be self-funding or it had to be reliant on government support. And for the past number of years, we've developed good relationships with the federal government, who funds our services, and therefore we are able to provide our services free of charge so that the benefits stay in the communities.
Yeah, and you mentioned the early days, like you've been there from the beginning. And who were some of the other people who were instrumental in the establishment of the Major Projects Coalition? Who were there in the early days that really helped the group get its start?
Well, really, it was Harold Calla, the executive chairman of the First Nations Financial Management Board, and former Senator Jerry St Germain, who really responded to the call of leadership who had just lost out on an equity opportunity in the Pacific Trails pipeline project. And so they came to meet with Harold and Jerry at the Financial Management Board, and it really snowballed from there. Former Senator St. Germain had just retired from the Senate of Canada and found the cause so compelling that he said, well, you know, given my Métis heritage and the fact that that he grew up in poverty in his early days, he said, you know, I have a personal connection to this issue. And he says, I'm retired, so I don't want to slow down yet. So I'm going to volunteer my time to see if this can get going. And it really took off from there because Jerry and Harold were able to convince the federal government to fund this as a pilot project in the beginning.
Yeah, I remember those early days. And when I really first met you, you were traveling with former Senator Jerry St Germain. In your bio, he doesn't talk much about the relationship that you have with former Senator St Germain. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship that you and Jerry have?
Sure. I worked for him in Ottawa for the better part of 10 years when he was chairman of the Senate Standing Committee on Aboriginal Peoples. And so it's there and through the relationship with Jerry that, I got to meet Harold and other players, Manny Jules, who were all working toward advancing legislation at the time. It was the First Nations Fiscal Management Act that created the FNB, but Jerry was very adamant that Parliament at the time passed that legislation, and that in later years that we worked to support Harold and the rest of the fiscal institutions in coming to be. So through that work, gave me a pretty good understanding, of what the issues were, and Jerry always took time for people, and that's really stuck with me. And particularly on Indigenous issues, our office became sort of the rallying point in Ottawa for a lot of different communities who needed a place to be and needed somebody to listen to them to advance their issues through Parliament. So I was quite fortunate to work with Jerry in that capacity because we got a lot of good work done in a short amount of time. And for Jerry, I think the opportunity to give back started with the creation of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, because there's only so much you can do from your seat in Ottawa. It has limited impact. And I think for him, and by association myself, it was great for him to get out on the land, so to speak, and help people directly. And that's what we were able to achieve.
Yeah, I was talking with my brother Satsan, Herb George, over the weekend, and he did mention to me the use of former Senator Jerry St Germain's office when our people, the Wet'suwet'en and the Gitxsan, were bringing our Supreme Court case, Delgamuukw to the Supreme Court of Canada. I believe we were able to use Jerry's hospitality there in Ottawa, as well as Jerry's reach. He has a significant reach, as you well know. And, when I think about the role of Harold Calla and the role of Jerry St Germain in our creation story, I think it's important to amplify that, because oftentimes we forget about the people who were there at the beginning. And they were able to open up a bunch of doors for us. Hey, Niilo, can you just give us an idea of some of the things that they were able to do for us that created, the opportunity for the success that we're enjoying today?
Well, Jerry had a direct link into the Prime Minister's office, and Harold, in his capacity, was very well linked in with the department officials. So it was really a tag team approach. And, for myself standing by, I couldn't have had better exposure to two people that I have high regard to as mentors in my professional development. And so I was able to watch the two of them really tackle the issue, which was a colonialist mentality in the Department of Indian Affairs in Ottawa and elsewhere in government, find sympathetic ears and supporters, and really persevere on a subject that could be and really has been transformative in terms of trying to position Indigenous communities to become full participants in the economy of the country. There's a real Stone Age mentality amongst the bureaucracy in Ottawa, where everybody's so risk adverse, and it's easier to tell you why something can't work than embrace a new idea. And so that's the uphill battle that Jerry and Harold face and still face today, and what we're doing in large part. But I am, for one thing, certain that if it wasn't for their perseverance and hours spent away from home trying to get this going, that we would not be the success that we are today as an organization without their dedication.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, I've been taught that if you can believe it, you can achieve it. Yeah. And I think through their presentations to the elected and hereditary leadership of the Major Projects Coalition, it planted a seed of opportunity in the forefronts of our leadership's mind. And, it's been said that a good leader will take you to a place that you wouldn't go by yourself. Right. And I really want to acknowledge, like you, Harold and Jerry.
Well, that's just it. And I think another part of this too that made it possible was the trust and respect that the leadership had, the leadership of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition at the time, for what Harold and Jerry were doing, because everybody was so transparent with one another. This wasn't for personal benefit, never has been. And really at the end of the day, Jerry and Harold wanted to act as a conduit for the messages that they were receiving from our leadership, and brought them to Ottawa, and out of that created this organization. So had it not been for the other element of the conversation, the trust and respect of the leadership at the time to enable us to do what we did, it wouldn't have been possible either. And I think that's an important notation to make, is that there was many hands involved in the creation of the Major Projects Coalition, and everybody working together really made this possible.
Yeah, it certainly has been a team effort. And in my experience, right, it really takes an aspirational vision, where a charismatic leader can paint a picture of the future, of a desired future state, and in doing so, inspire others to move in that direction. So there's people that can plant the seeds of the vision, but there's also people that need to operationalize that vision. Right? They're the ones that need to take it at the river's edge and give expression to it. And that's really the space where you work your magic, or where I witnessed you really excelling in terms of the application of the many, many different skills and gifts that you possess. And, you have a unique vantage point, your cultural background, your educational background, your professional background, positions you in a very unique spot. So we know that the term reconciliation has been thrown about by everybody nowadays. And what does the term reconciliation mean to you, Niilo? I know it's deeply personal for you. What does it mean?
Well, for me, it's about helping others. And if I can use my talents and attributes to help others get ahead, that's what it's all about. I grew up in an area of the country that has a high Indigenous population. I was born in Alert Bay on Namgis traditional territory. Grew up in a little place right next door called Sointula. And, right from my family's early beginnings on my mother's father's side, I saw the ability of people from different backgrounds to work together to get ahead and to help each other. And so I grew up in that kind of a communal setting or communist setting, which it really was. And some of those community values are really what I hold dear when I think about reconciliation, and just making sure that, you know, people aren't overlooked, because as a country, we've overlooked people who are disenfranchised and on the sidelines of society. And this is about making sure that the playing field is level for everybody, and that everybody can have a good life, and you know, basically live together happily. And that's what I see, and that's what motivates me to do this work, is to, you know, try and make a difference in that respect, and make sure that those who need help have a voice.
Yeah, the interesting comment that you allude to here is, like, in the conduct of my work, I'm approached by different resource players or small business owners or the Crown, and inevitably they want to know how to engage with Indigenous people, how to engage with First Nations people for success. And you know, I think there was, in the past, our people, Indigenous people, were seen as a business impediment, right? If we just work around the Indians, we can get to, you know, nirvana, which is, you know, money for our shareholders. But nowadays, you know, particularly as I witness the work of the Major Project Coalition, I note that really what you're talking about is, it's not a business impediment, it's a business imperative. Why is working with Indigenous people an imperative? Why should the resource industry, why should small business, why should Canadians care about you know, Indigenous peoples participating actively in the economy?
Well, for so long, you know, as you point out, uh, Indigenous communities were looked upon as a risk to be mitigated. And I think the view is starting to shift with some slowly toward a view that Indigenous communities as partners add extreme value to the overall stability of a project. And this has come about through different legal reforms, case law, and really advocacy on the side of Indigenous communities fighting to be recognized over the last multitude of decades. And it's gotten to a point where it is now imperative, if your project is going to proceed, that you have Indigenous partnership. And I'm not saying that everything is going to proceed, but for the right projects that are acceptable to our member communities, where the space is created for co-development and ownership, those projects are the ones that are going to proceed. And it's gotten to a point, Dan, where the financial markets and those who rate the financial markets, like Moody's and others, are starting to pay attention to what corporate Canada does in their relationship with Indigenous people, because at the end of the day, Indigenous interests are material interests to the business community. And that's what we're seeing here, is what takes place along the shores of Fraser Lake is going to have an impact of the cost of capital for some corporation in Toronto that's trying to borrow at the lowest cost. And if they haven't satisfied the local Indigenous community in terms of accommodating their interests, that leads to unresolved Indigenous interests. That leads to a higher cost of capital. And it may lead to regulatory and court challenges where, in certain cases, communities are left with no choice but to oppose the project. uh, corporate Canada cannot afford to continue to operate that way. And in tandem with this, there's a growing sophistication amongst Indigenous communities who are becoming business savvy through, organizations like ours and through their own means, where the leadership is not going to take the first deal that comes along. They're going to negotiate and negotiate hard for their interests, and so they should. Corporate Canada, I think, is starting to realize this. The transition is slow, but this is the way of the future. The reality is if you're not prepared to make Indigenous communities partners on projects, then you're going to lose. Bottom line. So our members have a tremendous point of leverage when it comes to representing their interests with industry, and that's something that is, I think, really exciting.
Yeah, we've got a tremendous amount of legal power, right? As Indigenous people, court case after court case, we rack up victories at the Supreme Court of Canada. And, in my work with big business, they are concerned about two things, right? They wanted a favorable taxation and regulatory regime, and they wanted certainty of access to the land base. And the quick realization is that it's our people who are the ones who are the only ones who can give you certainty of access to the land base. So I really admire the work of the coalition as it moves towards co-development, ownership, collaboration. And I think one of the really interesting wrinkles of the Major Projects Coalition that not too many people clue into is the fact that there's hereditary leadership and elected leadership as well, who are members of the coalition, who are collaborating together for greater impact for their citizens. Can you talk to us a little bit about the hereditary and elected leadership who are your members?
Sure. I think it was, an important recognition early on in the coalition's development that both sides needed to be included, and that there were nuances in the decision-making process in different areas of our membership, particularly Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en, that were really driving it at the time. It's also important for us as an organization that we include the hereditary aspect of the leadership in our tools, our decision making, and our processes, because I don't think many people realize, those who are outsiders looking in, but hereditary leadership do not have the access to the same government services and supports as the band council does. So oftentimes, while they're a very important component of the decision-making process on the land base, they're left out of the resources. So we've said as an organization that our tools can be taken advantage of by hereditary leadership to inform their decision-making. An example of that is we're now engaged with the Gitxsan watersheds in helping them develop a land use plan. And governance, Dan, as you know, is so important in communities when you're talking about advancing for the future and being able to take advantage of resource development opportunities or whatever the case may be. And so having these foundational documents like land use plans, etc., really help leadership in making those informed decisions based on real guidance. And that's where we're trying to get. I wish we could do a lot more, but incremental steps to begin with.
Mm-hmm. go slow to go fast, right? And the one thing for me is, in a lot of the work that I've undertaken, there's always an aversion to getting hereditary and elected leadership in the room together. And for me, I like to throw the door wide open because I think we have more in common than we do differences. The members who are on the membership list for the band council, elected chief and council, are the same members who are part of house groups, who are part of clans. So we're talking about the same people. We just have to find ways and means of how we can overcome decades of division that have been created by false labels that have been placed upon us, whether you're urban, off reserve, on reserve, status, non-status. We have to find ways and means to work around that. And it appears that the Major Projects Coalition has been successful to that end. A lot of your work is about raising the business acumen of your members, the financial competency, the environmental stewardship responsibilities that they have as well. Are there any other areas that you've been focusing in on capacity? When you're looking into the future and seeing where Canada's going as a country, what are some of the things you might see on the horizon that we need to, gather our capacity for?
Well, I think we've learned a lot through our support of our members in the last 5 years on major projects as to where the gaps are. I think in the next little while, we'll have the opportunity to come out with some services around how the capital markets work and how financing is raised, because we've learned through our engagement that there isn't a lot of knowledge at the community level about the decisions that need to be made in order to buy into a project. And so if we can get in and start to provide some literacy around that and some training, it's going to make for better long-term decisions. And it's going to provide some insight into a critical component of economic development, which is financing your participation as a partner in projects. The other area that's tied into this is focusing on the separation of business from politics. And this goes to corporate governance, and it's a little bit of a hairy issue, I suppose, in some sense. But what we would really like to be able to do is start to provide some guidance and some best practice around why you'd want to consider setting up a corporation with an outside board of advisors, how to really manage your resources for the creation of long-term wealth, the setup of trusts, etc. Because a lot of these projects have significant revenue streams attached to them. And what is done with the money at the end of the day matters almost as much as getting into the project. And I've heard from our members time and again that they want to have long-term sustainable wealth for future generations. And so that takes good governance and it takes planning. And if we can offer some tools around that to the benefit of our members, that's what we're going to do.
We've seen recent developments in the news, shocking developments out of the Kamloops Indian Residential School, which people are saying is essentially the tip of the iceberg here in the country as it relates to unmarked graves at residential schools. So it seems, Niilo, more people are talking about it. This really unfortunate, traumatic situation has to lead to something good. It has to. And I think that's the responsibility that we owe those who we have lost through the residential school system and that we have lost through the application of the Indian Act. And so with everything currently going on in the world right now, Niilo, what excites you the most about reconciliation?
what excites me the most is seeing the impact that the good things that we're doing are having on our members,
Mhm.
and really, I'm getting questions about, okay, what next, and that's a big indicator, because people are getting excited about determining their future in a way that they may have not had the opportunity in the past to do. Um, I get excited when I hear things such as the province of BC negotiating agreement on forest tenure with the carrier Sekani and returning control to them over the forests. I mean, this is transformative stuff here. You know, these are the things that excite me, Dan. And if we can play a small role in making sure that that people are able to determine the future for themselves, then I think the future looks pretty bright.
Niilo, are you a sommelier? Do you got any training in drinking wine? I heard you're a really good wine drinker. Is that true?
Well, I used to be, Dan,
You
and
used to
and
be.
I say that because wine and kidney disease don't really mix, and I live with stage 4 kidney disease, and I I used to enjoy drinking wine a lot, and now I can't, because it just doesn't agree with me. But I got certified as a wine professional, or sommelier, back in 2012, and that was a great experience, because it really brought in new friendships. It gave me a hobby. I don't have too many hobbies outside of work. I'm constantly working, so to have something to look forward to really was nice. And I still enjoy it. I still collect wines now and again, and I like them because they're part of hospitality,
Mm.
and to give somebody a nice meal with a nice glass of wine, or to give away a bottle of wine, it's an expression of appreciation, and so I still get satisfaction out of that. But unfortunately, I'm not able to enjoy wine like I used to.
And your stage 4 kidney disease, good things are on the horizon for you and your wife. Is that correct?
Yeah, my wife has been medically cleared to be my donor. Can't have a transplant just yet, Dan, because according to my doctors, I'm still clinically too healthy, with a 17% GFR, or filtration rate. I have to drop further to 11 or 12% before they'll do the procedure, and that could be a while yet. I'm quite thankful that during COVID, and as we're coming out of COVID, that I wouldn't have to go into the hospital for a procedure like this. But I am looking forward to having it done, because I have to live with the crushing fatigue that I have every day, because of the disease, and working as I do, and looking after myself is always a fine balance. And if you ask my wife, I don't have a balance, but I'm trying to be better about that.
Yeah, that those of us who know you, those of us who love and respect you, we're very, very happy to hear of the match of you and your wife, and it wasn't surprising, because you guys are a match on so many other levels as well. So it really fills our heart here at Reconciliation Road that you are going to be on the mend in the near future. I kind of chuckled to myself a little bit here. My wife, you and I are kind of similar in terms of our work ethic, I think. And my wife wanted me to get a hobby too, right? Because I don't have one. And so my hobby now is scratch tickets. I think she was thinking of something a little different for me, probably something a little recreational or athletic. But I've chosen scratch tickets.
How's the return on investment?
The return on the investment has not been good. It has not been good so far, but it's kind of like AA, don't quit before the miracle happens, right? So I got to hang in there until I win that big one. Listen, Niilo, many experts across countless leadership books and articles agree on certain principles that are required for leading a team to greatness. But when it comes down to it, the most important factor is whether or not the leader is getting the job done. As the FNMPC Executive Director, Niilo, you are getting the job done, and you're getting the job done in spades. You have driven and championed the FNMPC in the right direction. You have role modeled professionalism and a relentless work ethic that has served to both inspire and guide the staff, the technicians, the members, as well as your high functioning board. I admire many, many things about you, Niilo, but what I admire the most about your leadership style is that you look at a problem and see the possible outcomes, the possible future. You don't spend too much time stuck on problems. You think systematically and strategically, and this is reflected in the different tools, systems, and methods that have been put in place by the Major Projects Coalition under your leadership. You have little time for excuses, I've found. And I kind of laugh at that too, because I was supposed to start this podcast way back in April 1. And I kept up coming up with some excuses. And then after a while, you didn't have any time for that. So here we are. We're actually having the podcast. So good on you, Niilo. You also, what I've seen is you resist problem-oriented questions, right? Because we don't want to get stuck in the problem. We want to get stuck in the solution. And at the core of everything that we do. And I've witnessed this through the personal circle of colleagues, friends, professionals that you have around you, as well as the different organizations and entities that you have brought to the Major Projects Coalition. That collaboration is important to you. And, this notion that we are stronger together is exemplified by how you do your work day in and day out. So thank you, brother, for sharing your important work with the Reconciliation Road audience. Any final words you want to say on the way out the door, Mr. Edwards?
I just like to thank our members for continuing to and our board for continuing to allow me to contribute in the way that I am. It will always be a highlight of my professional and personal career for however long I get to do it. And, working with people like yourself, Dan, and others, it gives me a lot of joy in my life, and it gives me a reason to get up in the morning. So I just want to thank those people for the contributions that they've made in my life, and allowing me to do what I do every day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you, Niilo Edwards, for sharing your important work with the Reconciliation Road audience. Please join me in future episodes of Reconciliation Road, where I will introduce exciting change agents who are pushing the dial on reconciliation. Until then, stay safe and keep standing in the light. Masicho. Boom!
That's
Good
it.
job, Niilo.
Thanks, Dan. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are going to get better, man. As soon as these are getting better, we're going to get people are interested in talking. So I think I'm going to have some interesting guests. I also sent it to Jack Canfield. I want to interview him because part of his work was in Harlem, where he first started working with marginalized communities of Black kids, right? That's where he first got his power of positive thinking and all that stuff. And I want to try and get him on about how do you turn trauma into opportunity? Mm-hmm. Like the 215 and then there's more that are coming. How do we use that trauma to help us in the future. So I'm trying to get him on the program too.
Well, that's great, Dan. You're really doing a great job here, and I think, I have to share something. I talked to a First Nation in Newfoundland the other day, and they are in the process of joining FNMPC, and they have a $10 billion LNG offshore project. And I asked them, I said, how did you hear about us? And they said, oh, we've started following you on social media, and we love everything that you guys stand for. And so I say that to you because, the voices that you're amplifying through the work that you're doing in this podcast may not seem like much at the beginning, but it actually has a huge impact in the brand recognition and the notoriety of our work and your work, and what the ultimate objective is. So it's really exciting.
You're a good man, brother.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care, Dan. Have a good week.
You too. Enjoy the rest of your day, brother. Bye-bye.
Reconciliation Road is supported by the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. The FNMPC is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing free-of-charge resources to First Nations in Canada, supporting their efforts to gain equity ownership stakes in major projects being developed on their traditional territories, while ensuring that the integrity of the land is maintained for the enjoyment of current and future generations. The FNMPC envisions a future where we walk the path of the Reconciliation Road together. For more information, please visit us at fnmpc.ca.